Howdy. Welcome in and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. I'm your host, Will Stone, down here in Hutto. He's Chase Caldwell. He's up in Hatchie. And we want to start by just saying thank you to everyone who went and downloaded our first two episodes. The response was much more than we could have possibly imagined. We just crossed over 500 total downloads. We're sitting at like 529. So about 250 listeners, per episode. And Chase, I'm blown away. I don't know about you, man.
Yeah, I would have never thought that many people would have ever listened to it. Like, I figured we'd be like well into our first year before we would ever get to the 500 mark.
Yeah.
I thought it would take like 5 episodes to even get to the 100 downloads mark.
Right. I was thinking like maybe like on the high end, maybe 50 on our first episodes. Like total,
And honestly, I have no idea what to even, what the measuring stick is. There's probably people listening to us like, really? Oh my gosh, that's an easy mark to get to. And maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought we would have like 6 downloads,
Right.
and that'd be about it, But I'm just overwhelmed.
Yeah, me too. So if you downloaded those and you're listening to this, thank you. And thank you for coming back. We're just going to keep getting better every time. And I think the main thing that those numbers have done for us is just made us more motivated.
Absolutely.
And just gotten our creative minds flowing a little bit. And we've got a heck of a show for you today. But first, as always, subscribe if you haven't already. We are on Apple. We are finally on Google. We will be on Spotify, hopefully in the next few weeks. They have a minimum episode requirement, so as soon as we meet that, we will be on Spotify. We're also on YouTube, so you can check us out there as well. And follow our account at IneligiblePod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our topic today is the proposed 12-team format for the college football playoff. This came out last Thursday. Everyone's talking about it. If it goes into effect, which it likely will, it's not set in stone yet, but I think it's going to be the biggest change in the sport since they changed the TV rights back in like '84. So it's very likely going to happen, and it's going to be a big change from what college football has been up to this point. So really quickly, we want to give you kind of a brief history of how we got to where we are today. I know we have probably some young listeners like Chase and I that grew up during the BCS era and, of course have been around for the 4-team playoff, but Chase and I are on the same page to where we didn't really know what went on before the BCS or how it was any different than what we had, during that time. And back in the day, up until 1998, the champion was determined by the polls. Whoever was number one in the polls after the season, and sometimes even before bowls, was awarded a national championship. There was not a championship game. Chase, that blew my mind when I found that out.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some older listeners that are kind of laughing at us right now, like these millennials don't know the way college football originated, but
They used to be called patriotism.
Yeah, it used to be called patriotism. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's just I can't imagine any sport without a championship game.
Right.
It's kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion. It's the whole idea of if you win or end in a tie, that's kind of how it seems to me.
Right.
In fact, you said like neither one of us really knew that. The first time I learned that was whenever I was reading some of the trash talk between Longhorns and Aggies on Twitter. That's just an old pastime at this point, talking trash on Twitter to each other. And one of the big things that the Longhorns always go to is Aggies giving themselves 2 championships all of a sudden. And like they had this picture of the old Kyle Field. I know that you've seen it.
Oh, yeah.
But we're, 1 year it doesn't say that we were like 1919 champions or something, and then the next year it does.
Or 27 as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
And so they're like they just like to claim ancient championships that don't exist, and I was kind of like, why we wouldn't do that? I wouldn't think, like why what would we have to gain, to recruit people by being like we won the 1919 championship game,
Yeah,
like
you should come play here.
Yeah,
and replicate that success.
Yeah, we haven't done it in 100 years. Now's your chance. You can get that done. You can be the change that we've been trying to accommodate for the past 100 years. That's not a recruiting point that where anybody's using.
Yeah.
So it's that old Aggie joke thing, right? They make Aggie jokes out of it, I guess, but then come to find out, well, anybody before 1998, did the same thing. It sounds like to me,
Well, yeah, and like to kind of fire back at Texas there, I believe it's 1970 where they claim a championship in a year that they lost their bowl game to Notre Dame, I think. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I'm not going to speculate on that because if my grandma's listening right now, she'll tan my hide if I agree with you. So
yeah, I'm sure she's got the T-shirt from that year.
Probably so. I probably have it somewhere, but no.
But it was very common to have split championships. Like if the polls disagreed, both teams would just claim them. If you go around the country, you'll see multiple schools, with banners from the same year saying national champions.
Co-champions, if you will.
Yeah. So that just didn't make sense to me. And I guess in 1998, they finally decided it didn't make sense to them either, them being the people who control college football. So they came up with the BCS. And the BCS was a mixture of the polls, but also mixed with computer rankings, which are objective. So we're just going to go off of that, and whoever was number 1 and number 2 at the end of the season, they would put those teams into the championship game, and then there wouldn't be any more split titles, except that there were, because not always the best 2 teams would play in those games. Like there was one year where LSU beat Oklahoma for the title, like in the championship game, but Oklahoma lost the Big 12 championship game badly, like 35-7, but they still made the BCS game. Well, USC had a really good year, and they beat somebody big in their bowl game, and they claimed the title. And I think the coaches poll picked one, and the AP poll picked the other. So like that was still happening in as late as 2003, So, but we did that for a while, and I think the straw that broke the camel's back was 2011. The SEC had been on a run of championships from 2006 when Florida kind of demolished Ohio State. So it was Florida, then it was LSU, and then it was Florida again, and then it was Alabama and Auburn and Alabama. And in 2011, the game of the century was Alabama versus LSU. I think they were 1 and 2 at the time, game of the century. And LSU won, and then they won the SEC. And most folks wanted to see LSU versus Oklahoma State, who would have made it had they not lost a heartbreaking game on a Thursday night in Ames, Iowa, on a last-second field goal, days after, I think it was the women's volleyball coach. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, Oklahoma State fans, but basically another athletic team was traveling and the plane crashed. And then 2 days later they played the game and they lost. And it was a heartbreaking loss. And that kept them out of the championship game because the BCS ended up putting in 2 SEC teams, which made a lot of people very angry. And then to make it even worse, Alabama actually ended up winning the rematch, validating the BCS, their decision in the first place. So after that, to keep people interested and not just have SEC all the time, they were like, well, let's do a 4-team playoff. There's nothing that can go wrong with picking the 4 best teams, and except that they gave it to a committee of 13 humans, and they were like, "You guys pick the best teams. You tell us, who should be in there." And the very first year, there's immediate controversy. It didn't even make it one season. All year long. So here's the deal. There were 3 teams locked in: Florida State, Oregon, and help me out here. Florida State, Oregon, and Alabama, of course, because they're always there. Those 3 were locked in. The last few weeks of the season, everyone is jockeying for that 4th spot. And I think Baylor had been there, and then TCU was behind them, or maybe vice versa, and then Ohio State was 6. Ohio State had lost early to Virginia Tech, and then won the rest of their games and smoked Wisconsin in the Big Ten Championship. And Baylor had beaten TCU, but dropped one to West Virginia, and then TCU had won all their games except Baylor. So there was this big cluster between 4, 5, and 6. Well, Ohio State, being the brand that they are, got picked for the 4th spot, and that made the rest of the country, especially Big 12 country, very upset, even though Ohio State would go on to beat Alabama in the first round and win the whole thing. So it wasn't all bad. And eventually, every conference got to participate. The Pac-12 has had a couple teams in. The Big 12's had really just Oklahoma in. But there's even been years where there were 2 SEC teams. And, that's when there's 4 teams and there's, 5 power conferences and Notre Dame's still out there. People don't like it when half of the playoff is from the same conference. And what it's really led to kind of wrap this whole process up a little bit, is the 4-team playoff has really led to a lack of parity. And it's led to a lack of parity because those top teams, they get the best players every year, and they're starting to get even more and more of the best players. So, which makes me think, I know it's cyclical, but if this just went on for the next 20 years and we didn't change anything, would it be Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma in the playoff every single year for the next 20 years? I mean, that's totally possible.
I'm gonna interject on you there, Will.
Go for it.
They called it a playoff. In my opinion, from day one, I didn't really like the 4-team thing, because it's like, it's like watching a little toddler, play with the things where you have the cube and the rectangular prism and all those, and they got to put them in the right circles. It's the literal definition, in my opinion, of trying to fit a literal square peg in a round hole, because you have 5 conferences and only 4 teams get in. That it never made sense from day one to me.
Yeah.
And if anything, that first year they lucked out so bad because the Big 12 had co-champions. And if that wouldn't have happened, that gave them the right to be able to say, oh, well, we'll just leave the Big 12 out, since they couldn't decide a winner. No,
yeah.
You're leaving them out because you didn't have a spot for them, because you only have 4 spots for 5 conferences. That doesn't make sense. You never stop to think that maybe there's one good team from every single power conference. It wasn't a true playoff, in my opinion. Now, granted, was it better than what we've had in the past? Yes. We just expressed that not having a championship game makes absolutely no sense, in my opinion, to any sport whatsoever. But the BCS had tons of flaws too, and so getting to an actual sport, where you actually have to play for it, was great. But they just botched it right out of the gate, in my opinion. And I know there's a lot of people that still vie for, oh, we should just do 2 teams. We should go back to the old way. But if you take the romanticism out of it, don't romanticize what it was like back in the 70s or 80s or how fun life was back then, because we're in a different world today. No matter if we set this up the way it used to be set up, we're not going back to the days of regionalized television. We're now still going to be at a national picture. So it's never going to get back to that. But when you look, like if you just take that part out of it and you forget all the good, fun times that you had just watching it where it wasn't as taken as seriously, what sport do you not need a champion? What's the point of playing a sport if you can't be a champion?
Right.
That just name another sport, and maybe there are some, but I don't even know what
There's
they are
not.
because I don't watch them
There isn't
because they don't
one.
have champions. You know what I mean? I think Jimbo said it whenever he was vying for us to be number 4 this past year, that we're the only level of football that doesn't have some sort of playoff, and everybody's been acting. There's been a real big undertone for expansion since that 4-team playoff first started, and we act like, or they act like, I guess I should say, that we can't do that because then the players would be playing too many games. Well, it happens in high school. It happens in NFL. It happens in all the other collegiate leagues. Like, why can't we figure it out here? I mean, shoot, soccer players play like 700 games a year. I don't know how many they play, but they play all year long and with different clubs and all that kind of stuff. I know it's maybe not as physical of a sport, maybe, but you still can figure it out. You can figure out a way to fit it in there.
Like all these players want to be in the NFL, and what is it like 19 or 20 games that you have to play if you want to win the Super Bowl. So
Right.
if I know that's a whole different conversation on, like, obviously NFL players get paid a lot of money and college students get stipends, but the point is it's not a playoff. You're right. Like, I think the best line I've heard is it's not a playoff, it's an invitational, because there's no criteria on how you get to it. Like, there's literally no way a group of 5 team, anyone not in a Power 5 conference, will ever make a 4-team playoff. And then, in 2016, it caused a big stink because Ohio State didn't win their division. Penn State did, and then Penn State won the conference and got left out in favor of Ohio State, who they beat. Because there wasn't any criteria. Like, it's literally 13 people sitting in a room watching the games and saying, we think these 4 are the best. And it was really doomed from the start, even though, like, it's made a lot of money, obviously, which is a huge factor in all this. But I think they've realized, as evidenced by their proposal here to expand, they've realized that they needed some to expand, to add more teams, and to have better criteria. So that leads us to the 12-team format. It's a little confusing. There's the CFP committee, that, like, the selection committee that actually watches the games. That's separate from what we're about to discuss here. This is the board of managers who run the whole organization, and the CFP management committee. So a subcommittee of the management committee, it was 4 guys. They got together and kind of hashed out this 12-team proposal that is going to go to the broader management committee and then ultimately to the board of managers this summer, and I think they will have a final say September. So we won't really know until then what all the details will be. There's still some back and forth to be had, and this probably won't go into effect until 2023 at the earliest. So the next 2 seasons, we still have the 4-team playoff. So this is just for...
Basically what you're saying, Will, is that the assistant to the regional manager let them know
Yes.
that, like, we need to make these changes? Yeah, okay.
Yes, the Dwight Schrute of college football. So here's the deal in a nutshell. So 12 teams. There's the 6th highest rated conference champions and 6 at large. Let me say that first part again. The 6th highest rated conference champs. Not auto bids for the Power Five, not auto bids for the Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, SEC, and ACC. That doesn't matter. If the champion of the Mountain West and the champion of the American are ranked higher, they will trump one of those other conferences. It would have happened last season because the Pac-12 champ, Oregon, was ranked 25th. And Cincinnati and Coastal, who won their respective conferences, were ranked like 6th and 12th. So that was a big point. I had never considered this. I had no idea they were going to bring this out, and I think it's genius to do it that way. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, your 6 at large, which this part does go back to the selection committee. It just goes off of their ranking of who the next 6 best are. But with this big of a number, I don't think you're gonna see the complaining about, you know, who's 13 versus number 12, as you've seen with who's 5 versus 4. You know.
Yeah. The thing that I see with it is you got a weird number. 12 doesn't, reduce down to 2 very easily without you having buys and stuff, which we'll get into.
Right.
So in some ways, it's almost like, you know how like there's that like urban legend that Carmex has glass inside of it so that it makes your lips like, get worse over time, and that way you have to use more Carmex. It's almost like it's job security in that regard because they're setting it up. I think it's a great system, but they're setting it up with problems right out of the gate to where there's going to be backlash from people because there's going to be people that want to expand to 16. There's going to be people that want to shrink to 8. And that's all we're going to hear for the next however long. And then you're going to have your old codgers, I guess, that are saying, oh, no, we need to have 2. You know what I mean? So, or the 4-team playoff was a better way to go. No, that's not even a playoff. It's just a 4-team, same 4 teams. This will give some parity to college football, I think. But we really could. We're going to see more arguments coming out of this.
Right.
And I'm not even necessarily saying that I don't like it because I like 12 way better than I like 4. I mean, heck, I'm an Aggie, so I mean, this is the 12th man rule, right? Because A&M got left out. We were 5th last year. Jimbo caused a big stink about it, which was fantastic. And then now we have 12 teams. It's just kind of it's very romantic, how it all fits together like that. But
when they first released 12, it was like I was shocked. Like I think everyone in the country was expecting 8. Like it was just a foregone conclusion. And they come out, they're like, well, we're going to look at all options, and they're like, hey, we decided on 12, and everybody's like, what? Like it really caught everybody off guard.
Yeah, because I think it's hard, to every notch up, it gets that much hard. I mean, you go from 4 to 8 to 16 to 32. If you're going out that amount. So, do you do top 8? Do you do top 16? It would be hard. There's things that each of them are going to see that are pros and cons over the other. So I feel like they kind of went with the literal middle number of 12. And there's some things that I really like about it. The first thing is you're not automatically left out if you lose a game.
Right.
That's what happened to A&M this year. I mean, I'm not sour grapes over it and real bitter, and that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have these various problems within college football where kids are leaving early, they don't play in their bowl games, they opt out mid-season, and everybody's been griping about it for a long time. Well, this this prevents that from happening. I mean, and I could say that with when I worked for the team, and we came out 6-0 and everything was exciting, and I'm like, is this going to be the year that we really make it, I would get on TexAgs. I would be watching every episode of The Pulse, and I mean, half of them I was in, but I'd watch them and rewatch them, and I'd be talking to Clay or somebody else that's recording it, like, oh, what are y'all gonna do on this episode and stuff, and I was just all into it, and then we'd lose 2 or 3 games, and I would get to the point that I'm just kind of like going to work and then go home and would never even follow college. I wouldn't even watch other games. I would kind of I'd lose interest in the whole season. So I don't blame I don't blame an actual football player who has gone to so many more efforts. I mean, they're working so hard to get somewhere, and you get 2 or 3 losses, and you're like, man, I'm going to the Franklin American Mortgage Company Music City Bowl. Great, fantastic. That's what I wanted to do in college. Yeah. So gone are the days of just being like, hey guys, we're going to go on a core trip over to Tennessee, and that be like the most exciting thing. The most exciting thing is that you're on the national stage, and so when you take that away from guys in mid-October, why do you then get mad at them for not wanting to continue the season or continue playing? I love sports, but I don't blame kids. I don't blame these people that are trying to make something for themselves and want to be great, and you don't know their family situation. Some of them may have come from absolutely nothing, and they have an opportunity to maybe make a couple $100,000 even, even if they're just a practice player, and they say, oh, well, there went your draft stock. Who cares about draft stock? They want to make a little bit of money to where they can afford to help their parents back home that aren't making money or something. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody's like that. I'm just saying there's examples like that, where we will get all into where you blame players for what's going on instead of looking, it's that adage of you're looking at the splinter in the eye instead of the 2x4 in yours,
Yeah. Well, I think
there's this big overarching problem with that 14 playoff system.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like before the 14 playoff, you didn't have opt-outs. It just didn't happen. And
exactly.
once the playoff came about, that's all ESPN talked about from the very start of the season. It's who's in, who's the top 4, who's in your top 4, who do you got? It's just nonstop about the playoff, and it's made it to where. That's all. If that's all the fans hear, that's all they're gonna care about. And as soon as, like you said, like you lose the game, you're like, well, we're not gonna be in it this year. There's no way. So, like, why should I be as excited about going to the Franklin American Mortgage Music City Bowl as I would be, like a playoff game? Which,
right?
After reading this, I'm banging the drum for 12. Like I am. The more I read it, I'm fired up, and I'll tell you why right now. So, like we said, 6 highest rated conference champs and 6 at large. There's 12, so the top 4 highest rated conference champs get a bye, not the 4 highest rated teams, the 4 highest rated conference champs. The first round is played on the first round of playoffs is played on the campus of the higher seed. And the rest of the games after that are played at bowl sites, which I don't like, and we'll get to that. But just out of the gate, the first thing I noticed was the 4 highest rated conference champs get a bye. Notre Dame isn't in a conference, so
that's what they get.
They'll never get a bye. But like I was, trying to poke fun at them on Twitter, and like I talked about that subcommittee group that came up with this plan. A member of that committee was the Notre Dame athletic director, Jack Swarbrick, and he's on board because when you think about it, like they won't have a bye, but they also don't have to play in a conference championship and risk losing and being knocked out completely, or having that wear and tear on their team. So they seem content to, max out at the 5th spot, and oh no, we have to host a home playoff game at the stadium up there.
There's where it really is. They don't want to play in a conference champion. They just want to make all the money when people, go to their stadium. But so a point on that you made, the conference champs. I hadn't thought much about Notre Dame. I did think about them kind of being almost forced into a conference, but I wasn't thinking about it that way. So you make a great point. That's the first I've heard that.
Yeah, and I think Swarbrick just came out and said, like, I don't want to hear about us, only playing 12 games instead of 13, like other, conference champs and whatnot do. But
so sorry to cut you off. That's what I was going to say about the conference champs thing, because I think that's a concern for everybody on this thing, especially big fans of college football, is that you devalue the conference championships. We never went or we didn't really go into the history of conference championships. There's some really good stuff about conference championships. Like I think SEC Ready, there's a lot of stuff about it.
Do you know who had the first conference championship?
Was it the SEC?
It was the SEC.
Yeah, and I can't remember. Is that on SEC Ready that I'm thinking of, or was that maybe a production that ESPN did?
I think I read about it in Lofton's book, but anyway.
Okay. Well, regardless, we digress.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is, I have a sense of pride about the SEC. I don't know. I can't really explain to you why, except for I like a lot of the teams. I have all the SEC mini helmets because there's so many of them that are really, really, really cool, But the SEC is a great conference, but I've got friends up in Ohio and some of those places that the Big Ten, they have a lot of pride in the Big Ten, and for good reason. Like, it's a good conference too, and so you hate to devalue those. But I think that when I first heard 12, I was like, oh my gosh, that's stupid. Here we are. We're going to hear people griping about it, for years to come, just like we've done with the 4-team playoff. I felt exactly how I felt about the 4-team. I'm like, can we get somebody up there that can count? That was my initial thought. But after looking at it, I'm saying, wait, okay, so in this example, let's use 2020, where A&M lost to Alabama, and a lot of people felt like, well, you can't really gripe about being left out, win all of your games, and that doesn't happen. Well, of course, we are saying, well, yeah, but our games are harder than some of these other games, and you didn't apply that same principle to Notre Dame and things like that. But I would be all for A&M having to play an extra game that Alabama doesn't have to play, because at that point, I'm on the side with you. I'm saying, yeah, we should have beat Alabama, and we would be able to go be an automatic seed, basically. I don't see the day that SEC is so downtrodden that we're not one of those top six conference champs.
That will not happen. It won't happen.
I don't think it'll ever happen.
But yeah, like to your point, a lot of people when this came out were like, well, 12 games, like that means that a 3-loss team can get in and it devalues the regular season. No, it doesn't. Like I heard one guy, I won't blast him on here, but he was just going on and on about like you're going to see players opt out of rivalry games at the end of the year because they're already going to the conference championship and blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're not going to opt out of like Bama players are not going to opt out of playing Auburn. It's not going to happen because you don't want that loss on your record. There's at every level of this thing, like going into the end of the year, that last month of the year, there's probably 20 to 25 teams that are still alive, still in the hunt. And there's an incentive for every level of those teams. Like if you're in Alabama, like your incentive is to win the conference and, be ranked in the top 4 of conference champs and get that bye week. If you're an A&M, you don't want to, just barely sneak into the playoff and drop a late one and have to go play in freaking Madison, Wisconsin in December. So like, and then if you're, Coastal Carolina or somebody like a Indiana last year who would have snuck in at number 10, I think, or 11, like you're just trying to stay alive. Like you're just trying to keep winning, every game to just get your way into the playoff. And then, you're in the dance. Like you still have a shot at a title. You probably won't win it, but you still have a chance.
Yeah, there was something that you said earlier that I disagreed with, and I'm not recalling what it was, but you said that you wanted to mention it whenever we got into this, 12-team setup.
Was it about the quarterfinals being at bowl games?
Yes, yeah. Let's get into that because I'm curious to hear your opinion on that.
Basically, I just don't like it. It feels weird that the top 4 teams that get the bye week don't get to host a playoff game, but teams 5 through 8 who aren't as good or didn't have as good of a season do get that benefit and that extra income for their universities and their localities and things like that. It just feels like, and it's also on top of that, it just seems like a lot of travel. Like if you're in that position, that means that if you intend on going to all these games, that means you travel to a neutral site for the conference championship game. You'll have to travel to another bowl site for the quarterfinal, and then the semifinal, and then the final if you are lucky enough to make it that far. So it just seems a little bit tougher on fans. And in general, I'm a fan of college football on college campuses whenever possible. But I do think the semis and the title game should still be in bowls. But the quarters, I think, should move to campus.
Yeah, I like your insight there, your opinion there, because you make some really good points. I know I am 100% with you whenever I think that college football games should be played on college campuses. I don't like going to Jerry World to play Arkansas.
Right.
Even though it's closer to my house, it's 30 minutes from my house. I can get there a lot quicker than I can College Station or Fayetteville. But here we've been in the SEC for however many years, and I've never even gotten to see their stadium. That's one stadium I have not been to. And it's because we never play there. But we. So I guess I could say I don't like third-party places in the season. I don't like the college football kickoff games.
Yeah.
We played in the Advocare Texas Bowl kickoff game one year against Arizona State.
I'd rather go to Tempe.
I would too, because you get to see more, and that's what I've loved about moving to the SEC is that I first hated when we moved to the SEC because growing up it was all these teams that I didn't know. I didn't even know much about other schools like Auburn. I didn't know that Auburn had a history of winning and stuff until I got really into college football and realized, oh, they do. But I was like, who is Auburn? And, what are they?
What is Auburn? Why is Auburn?
Why is Auburn? How is Auburn? But but that whole thing with Colorado this year, where we're now going to play in Denver,
right?
Instead of playing in Boulder, no, I want to go to Colorado's stadium. I want to see their campus.
It's beautiful.
When you and I traveled to Georgia and we went to the Georgia game, Georgia has the prettiest campus I have ever been on.
Absolutely.
And I mean, bar none. Ole Miss has a really pretty campus, but it doesn't hold a candle to Georgia, in my opinion. But I have absolutely no idea what Colorado's campus looks like, and I would love to see what that looks like. And I'm robbed of that opportunity because. And I'm not saying this specifically because I'm not in the inner workings of it, but I'd imagine it's because we didn't get the revenue whenever we were supposed to play Colorado this past year.
I bet that's why.
trying to split that revenue.
Yeah.
And so that's the point that I was going to make about the bowls. The bowls are beginning to miss out on a lot of revenue. So you got to think about all of the different moving pieces in this thing, and you got to get a little bit of support from every which direction, so that you can get something like this passed.
Right.
And I think that's why they're trying to incorporate a lot of these bowls.
Oh, it definitely
because
is.
there's bowl committees that are saying, hey, if you do this, nobody's going to watch us at all.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's going to care about the Birmingham Bowl or whatever. I don't even know what bowls they're going to incorporate in there. But to me, I'm looking at it as a college football fan, the bowls that we have nowadays, you know, like the Franklin American Mortgage Company Music City Bowl, it's dumb. You know, it kind of creates a laughing stock, in my opinion, of college football, and it kind of shows like it just makes it to where you get a bowl and you get a bowl and you get a bowl and you get a bowl, you know, and it just it devalues bowls completely. You know, to have so many of them, there's way too many of them.
And I think they'll get cut back with the implementation of this. I think
they're going to get cut back either way.
Yeah.
Like if they implement this, let me back up. If they implement the 12-team system, it's going to cut back bowls, but is it going to cut back all of them if we go college campuses on every game, or will it cut back on some of them if we still incorporate some of them in the playoff? So me personally, I'm for incorporating some other bowls, just because you look at some of these kids that they've worked really, really, really hard. What it's creating, it's making these bowls. It's solving the problem of kids opting out of bowl games.
Yeah.
They have a reason to want to play for that bowl, because if they play in that bowl game, then they might advance to the college football championship. And so it gives them a reason to want to continue and stick it out with their team. But if they go into that game and they lose, they at least, you think of a senior, right? He goes into that game, might be the best season that his school has had in 50 years, you know, and he's led his team as a senior. They get to this bowl and they lose. Well, that's a real bummer, and that's a hard pill to swallow. And to at least be able to go out by playing in a big bowl, I think is a good benefit to the kids, you know.
Yeah.
And so there's that component of it too. To me, I do think it's harder on the fans, but it's better on the players. And I'm more for being better for the players, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. To kind of wrap up our pros here, well, we've really been doing pros and cons here and some good back and forth.
Yeah.
But to kind of summarize my points here, this is going to lead to better access for, it'll affect A&M. Like A&M should be in this every year, or every 3 out of 4 years, A&M should be in this top 12, especially in the near future. Teams like Cincinnati, like UCF, like Memphis, they finally have a chance. Boise State, who finished number 3 in the BCS for so long and could never break through to that top 2, they'd be in, you know. And the matchups, oh my God. Like, I know, like, I've been blowing your phone up about this since this came out last week, but I put this spreadsheet together going all the way back to 2011 of all the different games that we could have had we had a 12-team playoff. My favorite, of course, is 2012 when we had Johnny and, you know, lost early to Florida, you know, dropped one to LSU. But at the end of the year, we were one of the best teams in the country. And I'll just read off how this would have looked in 2012. So your top 4 seeds would have been Alabama, Kansas State, who won the Big 12, Stanford, who won the Pac-12, and then Florida State, who won the ACC. After that, Notre Dame, who was actually number 1, would have been number 5 because they don't play in a conference. They would have hosted Boise State. That would have been awesome. Florida would have hosted Northern Illinois. They probably blow them out, but that was that really good Northern Illinois team with Jordan Lynch, like me and you talked about, Chase. And then the two big ones, Oregon would have hosted Johnny Manziel and Texas A&M. That's just cool, man. That's just fun.
That was his original school too.
I know. And we could have traveled to Eugene and gone to Autzen, and I think
did they have Marcus Mariota that year?
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been fun. And then to top that off, the other first round game would have been LSU at Georgia, a good old SEC matchup, and the winner of that game would play Alabama. I mean,
yeah.
And looking back, like, I know let bygones be bygones, but if this was implemented, A&M probably cruises to the championship game against Bama, and who knows what would have happened, If we beat them once, we may could have beaten them again, but it would have been a lot of fun, and people would have watched the crap out of these games.
Yeah.
A few other notes that I had on here. That 2014 season that everyone hated, Baylor and TCU still get left out, but they both host playoff games, which is awesome. Like, you want that for your fans. They would still be in. They wouldn't be playing in whatever bowl games they ended up in. Teams like Colorado would have made it over the past 10 years. North Carolina would have made it. Penn State and Wisconsin would have made it a lot. Auburn would have made it a lot. USC, Washington. What really stuck out to me was 2019, Bama would have been left out. They were ranked 13th in the final poll, and I think the 12th spot went to Memphis for winning the American. So it's crazy that Bama would have been left out in a 12-team scenario in any recent year, but in 19 that would have happened.
Yeah.
And then to wrap this up, 2020, this past season, would have been just fantastic. Cincinnati would have hosted Georgia up in Cincinnati. The winner of that game would have played Alabama. Florida would have hosted Iowa State. Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney probably don't opt out and play in that game in the Swamp. That would have been fun. A&M would have hosted Indiana, a pretty good Indiana team at Kyle Field, for a chance to go play Ohio State. That's fantastic. And then the People's Champ, America's team, Coastal Carolina, would have played at Notre Dame, and they may have beaten them. That would have been a really fun game to watch.
Yeah, it would have.
The point I'm trying to make is this is going to lead to so many good matchups, and not that most of these matchups have been happening in bowl games, but they've kind of been deemed meaningless. Evidenced by half of Florida's team opting out of the Cotton Bowl last year. If they're playing for a chance, to get back in and win a title, they're not opting out. It's going to be a great product. Right.
And that's what you want to see with these great matchups is, you have. That's what I've really enjoyed about college football the past, I don't know how many years, is you've seen a lot of these schools that aren't blue blood schools, like North Carolina, that are fantastic. And
Indiana last year.
Yeah, Indiana. Coastal Carolina. You mentioned
BYU.
them. There's so many teams that are just really, really, really good teams that whenever it comes to bowl season, you either A, they have players that opt out, or B, the really good team that they're playing has a whole bunch of players to opt out, and you don't really get to have the full-on effect of seeing both of those teams at their highest octane going against each other, and it just is a really good thing in my opinion.
I think here's my final point to really play off of what you just said there. The teams outside of Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, the teams that you just talked about, North Carolina, Boise State, Indiana, Arizona State, Washington State, all those teams, I mean, in the 14 model, of course, all the recruits are going to go play for Alabama and Ohio State and those teams because those teams are in it every single year, and they're going to continue to be. Like, it's just getting the gap is just getting wider. So my biggest hope for the 12-team playoff, if everything else goes bad, hopefully the result of this is more parity. Maybe a North Carolina can sell, hey, come play here. We can make the playoff. We can make a run. You can do it here and not have to go to, a Georgia or Alabama, or, an Arizona State can, keep their players in state and they won't go to, Texas and Notre Dame and all over the place. And maybe USC can finally start keeping their talent at home and not letting it go elsewhere. Yeah. But USC's, like they're traditional blue blood, but like this is more about the more mid-range teams and the UCFs of the world, the Memphises of the world. Give these guys a chance and help them, improve their programs. And I think that's like I said, it's my biggest wish for this model is to increase parity because it's just more fun when it is. Like everyone's tired of Alabama and Clemson playing every year, or Oklahoma getting in the first round and getting smoked. Like they want to see, a little bit of chaos, and a little bit of variety. Like there for a while when it was the Cavaliers and the Warriors every year. Like people got sick of it after a while. Like they want something new, and I think that this will provide that, and I really hope that it does because it's just going to make the sport even better.
Yeah, and my final point to that plays off of what you just said, which is maybe some of these teams can start keeping some of their players in state.
Exactly.
So I think if you're a college football fan, you've got to want expansion of some sort, whether it's 12 teams, 8 teams, 16 teams. You've got to want expansion because that means more football games, and that means more good football games. But if you're one of the old hats that want to see the days of the Southwestern Conference, and the regional teams, the way to get back to that is by allowing these teams to have an opportunity to play for that championship, because we're in a world where college football is nationalized now. We get recruits from all over the place. We just got a recruit from Australia. I didn't even know they played football in Australia, but we have a recruit that's about to play for us on that.
It's gone global.
And yeah, it made me think of the replacements. When they had the kicker there. So it's just like that's such a cool thing, But players, we're not in a world anymore where they're going to default to their home team. You still have a lot of that, but if they have an opportunity to go somewhere else, they very well might. And if you're Nick Saban going in and sitting down with a recruit that's in California, and you're looking at how USC has kind of gone downhill, how UCLA is kind of meh, but Nick Saban's in my living room and he wants me to go all the way to Alabama, and my parents might not be able to go to all the games, but I could win a national championship, and maybe I win that national championship at the Rose Bowl, and I'm going to go there,
And you can FaceTime your parents every day.
Yeah, as opposed to, okay, well, sure, Alabama's probably going to be there, but USC has a really good chance of making a comeback, and I want to be part of that because all of my family is USC fans, or whatever. So, like, if you're like a Texas fan that wants to see Texas get back to prominence, you got to be about it, because you're dealing with people coming into your state, taking recruits out of your state. And I don't know, a lot of people blame A&M for moving to the SEC on that, but that's just a cop-out. The reality is we're in a world, we just spent a year where everybody was video conferencing each other, and Will, you and I talk more and see each other more than I see people that live here in town, and we live, 2.5, 3 hours away, and it's because we can video conference,
Right.
and so we live in this electronic digital world that you can do that, and if you want to get back to any kind of regional, passion, any kind of regional commitment, you got to do it by expanding and giving more players the opportunity to. So at the end of the day, it's all about playoffs. Playoffs is all it is.
Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
We are not kidding you, Jim. We're talking about playoffs. That's good stuff. But just to sum up why we think this is such a great idea, I mean, it is more inclusive. It is it's easy to tell who's going to be in. There are set rules for how you qualify. Some of the games are on campus, and that's terrific. And the matchups, as we ended on, it's going to be so much fun for college football fans, and really fun for the networks because they're going to make a boatload of money off of all this. So we went a bit long today, but this is a big deal. Like we said, this is a huge change in the sport, and it's very likely that it's going to happen. Maybe not the exact details, but it's going to be 12 teams, and it's going to be very similar to what we have laid out today. And I'm pumped about it. But
my hat's off to the planning committee because they're really trying to mitigate a lot of problems with one solution. They're trying to mitigate opt-outs. They're trying to mitigate, to where schools still get the revenue from some games, and then the bowls aren't devalued, and they're getting more revenue. They're getting more eyes on them. I mean, it's just they really did a good job of trying to cover all their bases, and I my hat's off to them. I think they did a really good job.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And for a sport that does the wrong thing so often, it's good to see them get something right, and that the fans will enjoy and appreciate. And I'm still in shock a little bit that this is real life. But thank you guys.
Kind of wish it was this year.
Yeah, me too. Let's go. I'm already mapping out who's going to make it and who's playing where. But we appreciate you guys riding along today. A couple of programming notes before we get out of here. We are going to be recording our shows throughout the summer, or I should say releasing our shows throughout the summer on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And one of those episodes each week will be a national story, kind of like today, and one will be a A&M specific story. So this Thursday, we are talking everyone's big question for this A&M team in 2021. Who's going to be the quarterback? So tune in Thursday for that. It's going to be a really fun episode. Follow us at Ineligible Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review, 5-star rating. You can follow my personal account at WillstoneCFB on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Chase at Texas Aggie 15 on Twitter, not Texas Aggies 15. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
Bye.